I was 25 when I killed a man. It was on my wedding day, and my father had sold me to a powerful Korean mafia boss to pay his debt. I killed my husband-to-be. It was an accident, and I don't regret it, not for a single second. Now, before you judge me, before you close this video and decide you already know what kind of woman I am, I need you to stay. Because the woman standing in that bridal suite, in a white dress that cost more than my family had ever seen in one place, holding a shattered flower vase with trembling hands and a dead man at her feet. That woman was not a killer. She was a daughter. She was a best friend. She was someone who had been handed over like a payment, like a check, like a receipt, to settle a debt she never asked for to a man she never chose. And when that man came into the room on what was supposed to be her wedding day and raised his hand to her one final time, something in her stopped waiting to be saved. I called my best friend. Liora, come to the suite, side door, right now. 20 seconds, that's how long it took for Liora Quinn to appear in that doorway. She looked at me. She looked at the body on the floor. She looked back at me. And the first thing she said, the very first thing, was not "Oh my God" or "What did you do" or "We're finished." She said, "How much time do we have?" That's who Liora is. That's the kind of friend who saves your life without being asked. Within the hour we had hidden the body. Within the hour I had walked back out into that wedding reception, white dress, calm face, steady hands, and told people I didn't know where he was. I looked confused, concerned, heartbroken even. I was none of those things. And slowly, quietly, like smoke filling a room, the story told itself. The whispers started at the tables. The guests exchanged looks. The bodyguards made phone calls in low, urgent voices. And by the end of the night, the conclusion that everyone had reached without anyone quite deciding it was that Min Jae Hwan, one of the most feared and powerful men in all of Korea, had ghosted his own wedding. The sympathy was almost embarrassing. Poor girl. He left her standing there. He didn't want her after all. What a shame, if only they knew. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because before you understand what happened in that room, before you understand why I felt no guilt, why my hands were steady, why I would make the same choice again without blinking, you need to understand everything that came before it. You need to understand my father's debt. You need to understand what those Saturday dinners were really like. You need to understand the bruises he left that I hid from my mother. And most importantly, you need to understand a woman named Isolde Choi and the paintings. Stay with me. Because this story starts long before that wedding day. My father, Gideon Vale, was not a weak man. I need you to hold on to that. He was 52 years old and he had built something from nothing, a small import business, nothing glamorous, nothing that would make headlines. But it was honest. It was ours. It kept food on the table and shoes on our feet and a particular kind of dignity in my father's eyes that I now understand was worth more to him than money ever was. And then it all collapsed, not slowly, not gradually, all at once. Like a building with no warning, just a sound and then rubble, a failed shipment, a corrupt customs official who took everything and delivered nothing. A business partner who vanished overnight so completely it was as if he had never existed. 3 weeks. That's all it took to undo 4 years of work. My father was too proud to beg from family, too desperate to wait for a miracle, so he borrowed money, not from a bank, not from anyone sensible, from a man named Min Jae Hwan. Now at the time my father knew Min Jae Hwan had connections. He knew the money came quickly, without paperwork, without waiting rooms. He told himself it was a business arrangement. 2 men, a deal, a handshake. He didn't let himself think too hard about why a man like that had so much money to lend so fast. He didn't let himself ask the questions that had uncomfortable answers. And for 4 years, Min Jae Hwan said nothing. He waited, the way a patient man waits. The way a man waits when he already knows exactly how the story ends. They came on a Tuesday morning. I was upstairs reading. My mother alone was in the kitchen. My father was at the table, staring at papers the way he did when there was nothing left to do with them but stare. 3 black cars pulled up outside, men in dark suits. No smiles, no noise. I heard the knock. I heard the way my father's voice dropped immediately, that specific drop, that register of a man who knows what is at the door before he opens it. I came downstairs, and I saw Min Jae Hwan for the first time. He was sitting in my father's chair. No one had offered it to him. He had simply sat down, and everything in the room had quietly rearranged itself around that fact. He was dressed immaculately. One leg crossed over the other, a glass of water untouched on the table beside him. And he had this particular way of looking at a room, slowly, completely, like a man taking inventory of things he already considers his. When his eyes reached me, they paused. He looked at me once, then he looked again, and something shifted in his expression, just barely. Just enough for me to feel it without being able to name it. The meeting was short, clinical, almost polite, which somehow made it worse. The debt had grown. It was no longer payable in money alone. There were 2 options. Option 1, Gideon Vale would lose everything, not just financially. Everything. Option 2, an arrangement, a marriage. His eyes moved to me when he said it. I felt the floor shift under my feet. My father's hands went completely still on the table. My mother across the room found my eyes, and the look on her face, that quiet, calculating, terrified look, told me she had already understood before the word marriage had finished leaving his mouth. My father asked for 2 weeks to consider. Min Jae Hwan said, 1. He smiled when he said it. It was the only time he smiled in the entire meeting. That was the day my life split in 2. The before and the after. But the real nightmare, the part I still wake up from at 3 in the morning, hadn't even started yet. What followed looked from the outside almost normal. A car would arrive every Saturday. He would take me to restaurants where the waiters never made eye contact with anyone. He brought gifts wrapped in tissue paper so fine it dissolved at the touch. He spoke in careful, precise English, cultured, measured, almost gentle, almost. My best friend Liora Quinn sat with me every Friday night before each of those Saturdays. We had known each other since we were 9 years old. Not blood sisters, but the kind of close that blood can't manufacture. She had a laugh that could fill a stadium and a mind that could solve any problem before you had finished explaining it. She was the person I called before I called anyone else for anything. Tell me everything, she would say. Every single detail, and I would. And she would listen. And then she would look at me with those clear, careful eyes that never lied to me and say exactly what I needed to hear, even when it was the thing I was hoping she wouldn't say. The first few weeks I told myself I was imagining things, the way he corrected me at dinner. Quietly under his breath but with a precision that felt deliberate, the way he reached across the table to straighten my fork without asking. The way he looked at me when I laughed too loudly, a look that didn't say stop but somehow said it anyway. He's just particular, I told Liora one Friday night. She said nothing, just looked at me. He's controlling, I admitted, quietly. And, she said. And I don't have a choice. Liora was quiet for a long time after that. The silence said everything she wouldn't let herself say out loud. The first time he hit me, we were in the back of his car. I had disagreed with him, something small, something I genuinely cannot remember now. He went silent the way he always went silent before something bad happened. A cold, surgical silence. The kind that pulls all the air out of a room, and then his hand moved. It wasn't a wild strike. It was controlled, deliberate, like even the violence had been choreographed. I pressed myself against the car door. My face burned. My eyes filled, but I refused to let the tears fall because every instinct in my body told me that tears were exactly what he wanted. He straightened his jacket, adjusted his cufflink. Expect better from you, he said, and the car kept driving. That night I sat in my room with my hands in my lap and I was very, very still for a long time. I thought about my father's face when Min Jae Hwan had said the word marriage. I thought about what it would mean for my family if I ran, and then I picked up my phone and called Liora. I need you to find out who this man really is, I said. Not what he shows me, who he actually is, his past, his history, everything. She didn't ask why, she just said, give me a few days. What she found would terrify me, and it would also be the thing that saved my life. It took Liora 3 days. She came to me on a Thursday evening and sat across from me at my kitchen table and placed a name on the surface between us like something fragile. Isolde Choi, Min Jae Hwan's ex-wife, 45 years old, living quietly in a small apartment in a part of Seoul that felt deliberately chosen for its distance from everything. I called her. I expected to be hung up on immediately. Instead, after a long silence, long enough that I thought the line had gone dead, she wondered when someone would finally call. We met at a cafe, a window seat, midday light coming in flat and grey. She arrived in a coat buttoned all the way to the collar despite the warmth of the day. She was soft-spoken. Every sentence felt carefully measured before she allowed it out into the world. She sat across from me and studied my face the way someone studies a reflection they recognize but don't want to claim. He was charming in the beginning, she said. That's always how it starts with men like him. He makes you feel chosen, selected, like you've been let into a world no one else is allowed to see. She wrapped both hands around her tea. And then one day you realize the door you walked through was never an entrance, it was a cage. I asked her about the violence. She was quiet for a moment, then she opened her bag and she placed photographs on the table. I expected bruises. I expected medical records, maybe, documents. What I did not expect, what I was completely unprepared for, were paintings, oil paintings, exquisite ones. The kind of work you would hang in a gallery. The kind of work that would make critics stand close and use words like visceral and raw and deeply human. They depicted a woman's face. In each one the face was bruised, or swollen, or marked in that particular way that tells you a hand was involved. Beautiful technique, horrifying subject. I stared at them. He painted me, Isolde said. Her voice was completely steady. The voice of a woman who had told this story enough times to drain every drop of feeling out of it, but not the truth. Every time he hurt me, he would sit down with his brushes and his canvas, and he would paint what he had done. Like it was something to document, like I was something to document. She tapped the photograph of the last painting, the most severe, the one where the woman's face was barely recognizable. He called it his most honest work, she said, and then she looked up at me. Leave, she said, simply, directly. I can't, I told her. My family. I know, she said, I know you think you can't. I thought that too. She picked up her coat. But understand what you are to him. You are not a wife. You are not even a person. You are his next canvas. I walked home, 40 minutes through the streets of Seoul. I needed the noise, the movement, something outside myself, because the inside had gone very, very quiet in a way that scared me. He wasn't just violent. He was the kind of man who looked at damage he had caused and called it art, who needed to preserve it, frame it, hang it on a wall. In 3 days I was supposed to marry him. I could have run. But men like Min Jae Hwan have long arms and longer memories, and my family was still within his reach, so I didn't run. I made a different decision entirely. The morning of the wedding was grey, not raining, just grey, the specific grey of a sky that hasn't decided yet. The venue was a private estate on the outskirts of Seoul. Immaculate white flowers, tall candles that had been burning since before sunrise. Guests in expensive clothes who spoke in murmurs and never quite looked directly at anyone. I sat in the bridal suite, white dress. Hair done, hands folded in my lap, and I was calm. That is the thing that has stayed with Liora all these years, how calm I was. Not the calm of someone who has accepted their fate. The calm of someone who has passed through fear so completely, come out the other side so thoroughly that what remains is something sharper, cleaner, more focused. Liora sat beside me as my maid of honor. We spoke in low voices. We had something resembling a plan: survive the ceremony, get through the day, find the exit in the days that followed. It wasn't a perfect plan. It had too many moving parts and too many things that could collapse, but it was what we had. You can do this, Liora said. I know, I said. I meant it. 1 hour before the ceremony, the door opened. Min Jae Hwan walked in. He told the guards to wait outside. The door closed. And the entire room changed temperature. He was in a white dress shirt, jacket not yet on, and for just a moment, one single deceptive moment, he looked almost like a regular man. Almost like someone who was nervous about getting married. Almost human. He walked toward me slowly. I stood. He looked at me the way he had looked at my father's living room, like something he was deciding whether to keep. And then he reached out and touched my face. I did not flinch. That surprised him. I saw it, a tiny recalibration behind his eyes. A micro-adjustment, like a man who had expected a different response and was now doing quick arithmetic. "Want you to understand something," he said. "Today is not the beginning of a negotiation. Today is the end of one. From this point forward you belong to my world, and in my world, I know about Isolde," I said. The room went absolutely still. He stopped. "Know about the paintings," I continued. His face, that controlled, composed, perfectly maintained face, did something I had never seen it do before. It cracked. What came out from underneath was not anger. It was something older than anger, something colder. He grabbed my arm. The grip was total and immediate, the kind that leaves marks for weeks. He pulled me close and his voice dropped to something that was almost not a voice at all. "You have no idea," he said, "what you have just done." He raised his hand. And something in my body, some part of me that had been watching and waiting and calculating since the moment those black cars pulled up outside my father's house, stopped waiting for permission. My eyes found the flower vase on the dressing table, large, heavy crystal, white lilies. My hand moved, I grabbed it, I swung. The sound it made was not what you'd expect, not dramatic, not cinematic. A dense, dull impact, and then the crash of it shattering as both he and it went down. And then silence. I stood very still. My dress was soaked at the hem from the spilled water. My hands were shaking just slightly. I looked at Min Jae Hwan on the floor. I pressed 2 fingers to his neck. There was nothing, no pulse, no movement, nothing. Min Jae Hwan, the man who had bought my father's debt, who had turned women's pain into gallery art, who had sat in my family's living room and smiled when my father begged for time, was dead. And 30 meters away, his guests were still waiting for a wedding to begin. I locked the door, then I called Liora. One ring. "What happened?" Her voice was instant, low, already alert. "Come to the suite, side door right now, don't let anyone see you." 20 seconds, she came through the side entrance, took one look at the scene and did what Liora Quinn always does in a crisis. She went completely still, processed, decided. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't say, "Oh God, what did you do?" She walked to the body, checked what I had checked, stood back up and looked at me. "Okay," she said, "just that. Long before someone comes looking." "He told the guards not to come in," I said. "How long?" 20 minutes, maybe 30. Her mind was already moving. I could see it, that specific expression she gets when she is mapping a situation in real time, eliminating what won't work, keeping only what will. "He's not coming to the ceremony," she said. "So we make sure nobody thinks he left because of you. We make them think he left because of him." She looked at me steadily. "Men like him disappear sometimes. People who work for men like him know better than to ask why. What happened in the next 40 minutes is not something I will ever describe in full detail. What I will say is this. 2 women in a bridal suite, working with a precision that surprised even us, moved a body through a service corridor while a wedding reception continued 30 meters away, and loaded him into the back of a car that Liora had, without telling me, quietly positioned at the rear of the estate 2 days before. Just in case. She had known, not the specifics, but she had known something might go wrong. And she had prepared, that is Liora Quinn. I walked back into the reception. I looked confused, worried. I told the head of security I wasn't sure where he was, that he'd been in the suite, and then, I shrugged. I watched the confusion ripple. Men in suits making calls, guests exchanging glances. The particular energy of a room where something has gone wrong but nobody wants to be the first to say it. I stood in my wedding dress holding a glass of water I never drank, and I let the story write itself. By the end of the night, the understanding that had settled quietly without anyone declaring it was that Min Jae Hwan had chosen to walk away from his own wedding, that he had changed his mind, that he had simply left. The guests murmured. The sympathy landed on me like something soft. Poor girl, he didn't want her after all. That night on a road Liora had chosen specifically because it had no cameras for 11 consecutive kilometers, we buried him. We didn't talk much. At one point I looked up at the sky, black and enormous and full of stars, and something passed through me that I still don't have a word for, not relief, not guilt, something more complicated than both, the simple knowledge that I was still here, still myself, still standing, that he had not painted me, but we were not free, not yet, because men like Min Jae Hwan don't just disappear. They leave behind organizations, loyalties, and men who want answers. And one of those men had access to the CCTV footage. Something that doesn't but never stops. 3 weeks after the wedding that never happened, I received a message from a number I didn't recognize, 3 words. "We are looking." I showed it to Liora. She read it once, put the phone down, looked at me. "They won't go to the police," she said. "They can't, they own too many of them. This stays internal." Which means when they find us, and they will find us, there will be no trial. No hearing, no paperwork. She didn't need to finish that sentence. It was my mother who said the thing that changed everything. Eloin Vale had always been the quietest person in any room. The one who watched while everyone else reacted. The one who processed before she spoke, which meant that when she did speak, every word had already been tested. I told her everything. The full story, no version of it, the actual truth. She sat with it for several minutes. Then she said, "We need to find police that want him gone as much as we do. Not the ones he's bought, the ones he's blocked. The ones who have been waiting for a reason." It was the most strategic thing I had ever heard my mother say, and she was completely right. Liora spent 10 days making careful contact, through a journalist she trusted who had spent 7 years covering organized crime. Through a former detective who had once built a case against Min Jae Hwan's organization. A case that had been quietly killed by money before it ever reached a courtroom. The detective's name doesn't matter. What matters is that when Liora sat across from him and laid out the full account, the debt, the arrangement, the abuse. Isolde's testimony, the paintings, what happened in the bridal suite, he listened without interrupting a single word. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment, then he said, "I have been waiting for this for 6 years. You protect them?" Liora asked. He looked at her. "I can make sure that when they come for the girls, we are already there." They came sooner than anyone expected. It was a Friday. Seraphine and I had moved to a different apartment in a different district, different names on the lease, bags always half-packed, always knowing which window faced the street. The knock when it came was not a knock. It was the sound of the front door leaving its hinges, 4 men. All from Min Jae Hwan's in a circle. All moving with the specific, practiced stillness of people who have done this before and have no hesitation about doing it again. I stood in the center of the room. I did not run because I knew something they didn't. The lead man walked up to me and looked at me with the flat, impersonal gaze of someone who stopped thinking of other people as people a long time ago. "You know why we're here," he said. "Yes," I said, "and you should know why I'm not afraid." He frowned, then the windows came in, not the glass, the sound of them opening, simultaneously, both sides of the building. Police entry teams moving with the coordinated urgency of 11 days of surveillance, a warrant signed 48 hours earlier, and the particular institutional fury of officers who had been watching an organization by officials for years and had finally been given their opening. 4 minutes, that's how long it lasted. 2 of the men who came for us were shot. 1 would not fully recover, 2 others were taken without incident. In those same 4 minutes, 11 additional arrests were executed across 3 other locations across the city. Min Jae Hwan's organization did not collapse that day, but it fractured, decisively. In ways it would not recover from. I sat in the back of a police vehicle wrapped in a thermal blanket and I looked out the window at Seoul. Liora sat beside me. We didn't speak for a long time. "We have to leave," she said finally. "I know, tonight." "I know," she looked at me. "Are you okay?" I thought about that question honestly. The way I had learned to think about things honestly, without performing an answer, without saying what was expected. "I'm alive," I said. "That's the most important part," she said. "It is," I agreed. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt it not as something I was still fighting for, but as something I simply, completely, undeniably was, alive. We left Korea on a Thursday morning, 2 carry-on bags. Liora's laptop. A folder of documents the detective had pressed into our hands, testimony, evidence, a formal record of self-defense filed in the right systems, protected by the right people. "It won't be made public," he had told us. "That's the arrangement, but it exists. If anyone ever comes at you through official channels, it's there." It was enough. My parents were already gone. A quiet exit that looked, to anyone watching, like a family simply going home, which in every way that mattered it was. At the gate, Liora looked at me. "Where are we going?" she asked. She had been asking for days. I had been refusing to answer until I was ready. I looked at her. "Somewhere no one knows our names," I said, "and we start again from there." That enough. I thought about a girl who had been called into a living room and handed over like a line item in an account. I thought about a woman who had sat in a bridal suite in a white dress and decided, in the space of one breath, that she was not going to be the next painting. "For now," I said, "it's everything. There is a version of this story where I become a cautionary tale, the girl who was sold, the girl who was trapped, the girl who was broken by a world that looked at her and saw only what she was worth in debt repayment. But that is not this story. This is the story of what happens when a woman who was never supposed to have power refuses, in one irreversible, definitive moment, to accept that. I didn't set out to be brave, I set out to survive, and sometimes those 2 things are the exact same thing. Min Jae Hwan built his entire empire on one belief, that people with nothing to fight back with simply wouldn't. He was wrong about one person, that was enough. I have been asked since then whether I feel guilty. I think about it honestly every time someone asks, and every time I arrive at the same place. He showed me who he was, I say. He showed Isolde. He showed every woman he ever painted. He made sure we knew exactly what he was capable of, and then he expected us to accept it as permanent. The only thing I'm responsible for is refusing to accept it. Liora Quinn went on to become a legal advocate for women in coercive situations. She never talks about career professionally, but in every case she takes, in every woman she sits across from, there is something behind her eyes that says, "I know what this costs, I know what it takes. I know you can come out the other side," because she was there when it happened. She answered on the first ring. She said okay when most people would have fallen apart. And she showed me that survival at its most essential is just 2 people refusing to give up on each other at the same time. My mother kept one photograph, not of Korea, not of the wedding, of Liora and me at an airport gate, laughing, bags at our feet, the unguarded laughter of 2 people who know they made it even though they're not entirely sure yet what comes next. She kept it on the windowsill above the kitchen sink. She looked at it every morning. "They went through fire," she told someone once, "and they came out themselves. That's the only thing that matters." I was 25 when I killed a man. It was on my wedding day. My father had sold me to settle a debt I never owed. And I ended up with something no one expected me to leave that room with, my life, my name, myself. Nobody painted me and nobody ever will. If this story moved you, share it. Someone needs to hear it today. Drop in the comments, what moment hit you the hardest? And if you want part 2, what happened after Korea, who Seraphine became, whether she ever found real love, let me know below. See you in the next one.